Lord of the Rings Online has absolutely shot up in popularity recently with the release of the new legendary servers, and honestly, I could not be happier. With that said, with the introduction of all of these newer players, I want to do my absolute best to try and retain them, to try and keep them here in Middle-earth. LOTRO is a beautiful journey, but it can be incredibly confusing and frustrating if you're completely fresh to it and brand new. So today I wanted to go over some of the most common mistakes I made and even newer players will make when playing Lord of the Rings Online for the first time. Before we get started, if you do enjoy this sort of content, please do consider leaving a like rating and subscribing if you are new here. Lastly, a huge shout out to Kilniath, Kian Suckling and Reese K for becoming members of the Patreon. More about that later on as to how you can support for just £1. For now though, let's get right into it. First on the list of common mistakes that I've made and other people will make, is rushing to endgame. This could be in order to access endgame gear or just progress into endgame raids. Lord of the Rings Online, you have to understand, is very much about the journey as much as it is the destination. Our brains have been trained and brainwashed over the years to tell us that leveling is just another hurdle that we've just got to cross. It's a means to an end, and the game really, truly does start at endgame. And with Lord of the Rings Online, that's just not the case. The game starts when you start the game. That's your experience. I can tell you now that the experience of Lord of the Rings Online, if you take it at its own pace, really does speak for itself. I personally have got over 1,000 hours in the likes of Final Fantasy XIV. And honestly, even though I'm at a point where I'm doing extreme and savage raid trials, I'm having more fun now being in the realms of level 20 to 30 on the new legendary server and running about doing daily tasks and quests. It is just that the structure of the game is very, very different. It doesn't force you to, I guess it doesn't force FOMO upon you. There's no fear of missing out here. You log in, you spend as much time as you want to in the game, and you just live your life. This is supposed to be an enjoyable experience, not one that's forced upon you. Be sure to take your time, explore areas of the map that you wouldn't normally even think to venture into. Quite often, the places where you feel like there would be the least, there are often the most. There's the most to explore. There's quests, different character developments to get involved in. So yeah, just take some time and just enjoy what's going on around you rather than focus on rushing right to the end. The second common mistake that I see newer players and even myself when I first started make is skipping or absolutely blasting through the dialogue on the main story quest, and actually in truth completely ignoring your quest log altogether. Again, much like the first point, I think we've been kind of brainwashed with the likes of World of Warcraft that you would just spam through any text just to get to the next point, and with Lord of the Rings Online it really doesn't reward that kind of behaviour. This game does not hold your hand. There are no obvious waypoints or markers as to where certain things should be, so you really do have to spend a little bit of time reading and kind of using your brain, as strange as that sounds. Not only that, but the book quests, or the main story quests, they do really try and hold true to what Tolkien was trying to provide within the books and the way that Peter Jackson performed them in the films. So they are as true to form as they could possibly be. So there are quite a few magical moments in there that you're going to miss out on if you're just blasting past them. So take a bit of time, take all of that dialogue in. It is a bit more of a, I guess, text-heavy kind of game. There are some sort of voiced lines and some voiced cutscenes, but they're quite few and far between. You know, I'd suggest pushing past it, take on board the text dialogue, what's put in front of you, take out of it what you can. Some bits you can kind of skim through, but for the most part, there's some really, really interesting stuff there, and a lot of it will give you an indication on where you need to go and why you are going there. And there are certain quirky quest interactions that you've got that are only made apparent to you if you read the quest back. So just keep tabs on your quest log. If you're ever out and about and wondering why you should be somewhere and why am I here, what am I doing, check your quest log and a lot of it will be revealed to you. Just slow it down, absorb what's being relayed to you, and I promise you'll have a much better time. The third mistake that I see a lot of people potentially making, and probably are already making, is wasting your hard-earned LOTRO points. Most Lord of the Rings Online points are earned through very, very small portions throughout completing deeds, and they can be quite hard to build up extensively unless you have the VIP reward, which rewards you with 500 each month. Now, given that your LOTRO coins are the gateway to purchasing anything on the LOTRO store, you can probably see how these are these are going to be becoming quite valuable, considering there's quite a few items on there that really will help your journey throughout Middle-earth. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of items on the LOTRO store which are needless, cosmetic, one-time use only, so try and avoid some of those. I would suggest saving them up, saving some LOTRO points up, and focusing on more stuff like purchasing expansions, for example. LOTRO is a free-to-play game, will give you an abundance of free content, but at some point you are going to hit a paywall, so to speak, and you'll need to then start buying the expansions, you'll need to start buying character slots, travel and milestone cooldowns, which are going to help you drastically. For example, there are some new classes that are locked, so you'll need to unlock those for the LOTRO store as well, and if you don't have any LOTRO coins available or saved up, that's going to be coming out of your wallet. And trust me, if there is one major takeaway from the community that have played this game, it's the fact that people don't like paying for stuff or don't like being forced to pay for stuff. So do your best to try and minimize that as much as possible. Next up on the list is a term we actually just referenced, and that surrounds deeds. Now, not focusing on your deeds will really harm your character and progression, probably more than you even care to know. The reason for this is that many deeds, which is essentially Lord of the Rings Online's challenge log, has virtue experience attached to them, and this normally comes in bulk form, so you get quite a lot that is attached to each deed completion. This virtue experience goes towards, of course, your virtue level, depending on which one you've selected that you're earning from, and will progress those stats very quickly. There are certain situations in Lord of the Rings Online that no matter how good your gear is, if your virtue traits and stats are incredibly low, you're going to feel very soft, very weak, and very squishy. So don't be caught with your pants down, don't be silly, and get out of the gate early enough. Start completing some deeds, getting some virtue experience, and get ahead of the crowd. Now, mistake, so to speak, number 5 is one that I made so much, and it took me a long time to get my head around. I'm sure not a lot of new players will feel the same as well, and that's not understanding the map or where things are or how to access them. The map in Lord of the Rings Online, whilst beautiful, can sometimes actually feel like a raid boss in itself. It suffers dreadfully from low resolutions, poor zoom options, and that can leave new players feeling very lost. This is especially apparent when you start to collect more than just 2 quests at a time, and all you have is like multicolored blobs dotted about your map that you have no idea what they are or where they're from. So I guess my biggest tip to take away actually starts on the multicolored quest key within the map. If you want to know what certain quests are that are located within the same region that you're in on the map, the quest key is normally located, I think, bottom left of the map, and you can highlight your mouse over each individual quest as it's listed. And once your mouse falls under a selected quest, keep an eye on your map, because the multicolored blobs will actually start to flash, and then you can get an indication of, okay, that's where that quest is, if you want to tick one off in a specific order. To further this, coming outside of the map, take a look at your mini-map, because if you're trying to follow a certain path, or if you've got an active quest that you're focusing on, but you're not quite sure which direction you're going in, then look at the mini-map, look at the white arrow, and that will show you where you need to be heading. Furthermore from that, if you actually hover over that arrow with your cursor, it will give you a distance as to how far away that particular quest is. So you can kind of work out, is it within walking distance, is it within mount distance, or do I need to find a stable master, click on my quest log, work out where the destination is, and then go from there. I guess what I'm trying to say is work smarter, not harder. I feel like mistake number 6 really does kind of fly under the radar, but it definitely irks a lot of people that have played more traditional, maybe more recent MMOs. And that is kind of feeling like your attacks are non-responsive or just not working correctly. Lord of the Rings Online does admittedly run at a slower pace compared to other modern day MMOs, and this unfortunately is further emphasized during combat. Now, some combat classes are busier than others, that is absolutely a given. And of course, whilst I'm actually a fan of Lord of the Rings Online's combat, I do feel it has, of course, a real charm to it. However, I do know that this is where a lot of newer people will struggle coming into the game, and that is especially more prevalent with the skill queue system that Lord of the Rings Online uses. In many other MMOs of the current genre, if you hit 2 skills one after another, one of them will pop, you'll have a slight cooldown, and then the second one, as and when that cooldown is finished, will then begin to be used. However, in Lord of the Rings Online, it works Similar, but very different. Whichever skill you press first will be highlighted in yellow, then green once it's executed, and then if you quickly press another action or another skill, that will then be highlighted yellow until it's executed. Rather than it will show up, for example, rather than it showing up an error message to say you can't use that skill yet or a skill's not able to be used, it will just queue it. If you add into the mix the servers which are ever so slightly slower, although a little bit better now with the legendary servers, the combat can almost feel non-responsive because you're constantly looking at, okay, which skill is being queued to use, considering some skills are that they've got a lot longer usage time than others. If you happen to be in a certain region which is lagging a little bit more as well, and then you're already having a tough time with combat, I know this could be a severe hurdle that people will sort of get to and go, actually no, this is not for me. But have a bit of patience. Honestly, it kind of rewards looking after your finger fatigue. You know, LOTRO wants you to press one button, two buttons, then that's done. You don't have to worry about constantly spamming it because it's already put it into a queue. It is a good thing, I can assure you. Now, last on the list of mistakes, contrary to the first point I made, is actually spending too long in certain areas. And I know what you're going to say, Josh, you just told us to slow down and have fun, and now you want us to speed up. And I promise you it makes sense, so just let me explain. Many areas in Lord of the Rings Online have a set level bracket for enemies and questing, meaning that as long as you are of a similar level, you still stand something to gain. However, as soon as you find yourself a few levels above certain enemies that you've been killing for a few hours, you'll be eventually rewarded with 0 XP and nothing to gain whatsoever. As much as certain quests will still offer some sort of a reward, this will of course be futile in comparison to what you stand to earn elsewhere. So hear me out and definitely enjoy your surroundings, but also be mindful of your time and cats and your progression. This does bring us to the end of today's video. Thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this sort of content, please do consider leaving a like rating and subscribing for more Lord of the Rings content. If you guys are interested in playing together, I'm currently on the Mordor server, so I'm on there quite frequently, currently a level 20-ish, 23-ish elf hunter. So by all means, drop me a message and we can gladly play together. I would also love to hear some of your experiences throughout Lord of the Rings Online in terms of what do you know now that you didn't before, and kind of where was your time wasted when you first started? I think that'd be a really cool discussion to have. Lastly, if you did want to support the channel even further, as I mentioned at the start of the video, please do consider becoming a member of the Patreon for just £1 Great British Pound. The benefits and the link to this will be below. Thanks for watching and take care.